Kia ora, and welcome to the People's Select Committee. This is our 8th hearing. The committee is made up of former members from across the political spectrum, and we've come together to ensure that voices are heard on matters relating to the Equal Pay Amendments Bill 2025 that was passed under urgency without any public consultation. We are here to do what the government did not, to invite public submissions to allow open and transparent scrutiny. By hearing directly from those affected, alongside the wider public, we aim to consider the regulatory, economic, and social impacts of the bill with fairness and integrity. On that note, this is a People's Select Committee, the first of its kind, and we would like to stress that we operate under the ordinary laws and jurisdictions of the country and no special privileges that are accorded to ourselves or submitters. And in that vein, we ask that comments which may be defamatory of any individual be refrained, and we will alert submitters to comments that may stray from this boundary. Electronic copies of submissions will be released after the hearing scheduled today. The committee would like to take a moment to acknowledge the women, the champions whose footsteps we follow, irrespective of their position, their role, their contribution of ethnicity, who have advanced over many years women's rights, women's work, and pay equity. They are the sheroes of this kaupapa, and they are us, and we are them. I would like to introduce the members of the committee. We have Dame Marilyn Waring, Belinda Vernon, Ria Bond, Sue Bradford, Joe Hayes. I think Jackie Blue will be joining us, and Steve Chadwick. And we're all very delighted to be here. And I'm Lynn Pillay, your chair for today. Also, I'd like to now call on Joe Hayes for a karakia. Thank you.
Kia ora, Lynn. Ka inoi tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hiake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, te hei Māori ora. Cease the winds to the west, cease the winds to the south. Let the breezes blow over the land. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day.
Kia ora, Joe. And on that note, we'd like to thank all submitters for the time that you've taken to share your experts and your expertise. Please take your submissions as read and leave time for us to ask some questions after your presentation. You have usually around 10 minutes to speak to your submission. This is your time, your voice that the committee wishes to hear from. If you see little hand emojis come up, don't worry, we will leave questions until the end of your presentation. And we may, after our meeting today, have further questions, which we would put to you in writing if that's okay. So thank you very much. Without further ado, let's meet with our first submitter, who I know is here, and that is David Kenz from Engaging Communities.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, David.
Tēnā koutou
Welcome.
katoa ko David Kenz ahau. Thank you for the honour of speaking today. I'm more than a little nervous, but my opinions are grounded in lived experience and academic study. I've worked as a corrections officer and a suicide prevention coordinator, and I hold a Masters of Suicidology, which is a discipline that bridges psychology and sociology to understand the complex drivers of suicide and mental distress. And this submission reflects that blend, a synthesis of personal, professional, and scholarly perspectives. I also spent around 25 years as a volunteer ambulance officer and paramedic, giving tens of thousands of hours freely in service to my community. When I considered transitioning to a full-time ambulance role, I found pay at the time was too low to sustain my livelihood, and I chose to continue volunteering rather than accept a token income that failed to honour the depth and sacrifice and my commitment. This experience underscores the emotional and ethical cost of undervaluing frontline workers. In this presentation, I use gender-based inequity as an example, but my concerns span all biases that contribute to inequalities. These are the socio-economic and gender-based pay gaps are well-documented contributors to both mental health and physical ill health. I'm sure you're aware of the social, cultural, and economic determinants of health in New Zealand, 1998. Pay inequality undermines our sense of belonging. Earning less than male or other counterparts sends a powerful message of disrespect and devaluation. It signals that erode women's sense of inclusion, agency, and agency in society. Thomas Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicidality identifies thwarted belongingness as a core driver of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Cultivating genuine inclusion directly counters this pathway. And while the first 1,000 days have a huge impact on the architecture of our brains and our social identities, they continue to develop into our mid-20s and beyond. Pay disparities during the formative years teach young women their contributions matter less, and if there is no way to confront this, it is reaffirmed throughout their lifetime. Every act or omission that sustains unequal pay demeans my mother, my sisters, and the courageous females who I grew up with who taught me, David, things aren't right. People in my life now, my daughter and the woman and the variety of people of all cultures whose talents and dedications deserve and demand equal recognition are also devalued if we don't have some form of addressing the inequalities. True well-being comes from societies where everybody feels they belong. Equal pay is not just an economic imperative, but a cornerstone of health, dignity, and collective resilience. I have worked in and with NGOs, and I founded Engaging Communities as a social enterprise to challenge the structural limitations faced by traditional NGOs, non-profits, and charities working in the well-being and personal health sectors. These organisations often rely on limited annual funding and must demonstrate how they can deliver maximum impact with minimum resources and expectation that inadvertently suppresses fair remuneration for staff. If Engaging Communities were structured like a typical NGO, it would be constrained by the same funding pressures, forcing it to keep pay levels low despite the high value and emotional impact of the labour of its workers. Instead, as a company with the ability to generate profit, Engaging Communities can choose to reinvest earnings in sustainable operations that do not depend on grants. This model allows us to remunerate staff fairly, honouring their expertise and contribution while maintaining long-term viability. Engaging Communities is not yet an employer, but I hope it soon will be. The intention is clear: to build a dignity-safe organisation that sustains its ethical and financially sustains itself ethically and financially without replicating the inequalities it was created to challenge. By bridging the gap between purpose and sustainability, Engaging Communities offers a new pathway, one where social impact and financial dignity are not mutually exclusive. I've worked in both NGOs and government health, where I have received pay increases through formal equity processes. These adjustments were not just financial, they were affirmations of the value, recognition, and belonging. The woman I work with and I celebrated the recognition more than the extra dollars in our pockets. Pay equity mechanisms can work when embedded in systems with accountability and resourcing, and should be able to be reflected on and challenged without systematic barriers that are designed to maintain the status quo. These experiences shaped my decision to build a model that could sustain fair pay without relying on external grants. Engaging Communities reflects that vision: a dignity-safe organisation that honours emotional labour and expertise through fair remuneration and long-term sustainability. The question that I ask myself is, how could a company like Engaging Communities, committed to well-being through belonging, justify replicating the very inequalities it has created to challenge? We understand too well the harm caused by unfair pay. This is why our model insists on honouring people both with personal respect and fair remuneration. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with you.
Thank you very much, David, and what a wonderful perspective to come from. I know we have a question from Dame Marilyn Waring and then Steve Chadwick.
Kia ora, David, thank you very much. In your submission, you use words like disrespect, devaluation, and right at the very end, the word dignity. Now, I'm interested in a particular perspective because, for example, in the UN Declaration, dignity is one of the first fundamental human rights. And I wonder if you've thought about the impact of, for example, the cancellation of claims where there was already recognition and agreement between the parties that there was historic devaluation. What that might mean in the context of dignity.
I don't think you could underestimate that. My whole philosophy is how we live individually and collectively. So when the collective, if we're talking about broader society, suddenly isolates an individual or a group of individuals from that society when they were kind of in that thing, I feel it has a huge impact on identity of where you feel you belong. And I think dignity and identity are very closely related. And a personal belief through all my study is the importance of supporting people's identity. And when you have a strong identity and you're respected for your identity, then you have respect. Yep, does that answer or partly answer?
Yes, thank you very much. I think Steve Chadwick had a question.
Yes. Thank you, David. It's fabulous to get a perspective also from a man. It's wonderful. Could you tell me about your Engaging Communities network, and has equity been an issue in your discussions?
So as you can see, I'm not a spring chicken. And the Engaging Communities, I started when I actually left suicide prevention unwell from being in there for a long time. I've since been re-employed, but this is my my retirement project. Really, it's I'm investing everything I can so that when I can launch the company properly, then it's free. I don't have expenses. So the whole purpose of Engaging Communities, the name of the company, and its whole purpose is to address well-being through collective impact, our connection to society. And one thing I came across when I was doing some business studies for this business, was the idea that money is commitment. So if we are paying people a reasonable amount of money, then we are committed to them as employees, as valued people. If we do not do that, we are not committing ourselves to that person. So I feel that commitment, it's not money for money's sake. Money is a commitment to that person. And that's, I think, very valuable.
Thank you so much, David. Belinda Vernon's got her hand up. Sorry, Belinda, I didn't see that.
It's okay. I'm still fighting the technology here.
Oh, well, that's okay. We saw your real hand.
David, can you just elaborate a bit more? You talked about wanting to have a sustainable model in your business, and that the pay equity should be part of that. Can you talk more about how you have made it, how it is going to be sustainable? How you've overcome that sort of cost barrier.
Yep. So the business has three really main products, I guess. One is, I'm a martial artist. One is called the Shining Light Dojo, which is a membership database, a membership group where people will say submission, pay a fee to join. That fee will fund that group, but it will also fund some of the other operations, which is the Aotearoa approach to suicide prevention, which I am delivering for a nominal fee just to meet costs. So the sustainability rather than profit for me is important, but I'm hoping it'll grow to a point where I immediately have to employ somebody to help me with it. And the idea is that the income from the small income from the Aotearoa approach and the larger income I'm hoping to have from the Shining Light Dojo part of it will fund the other things that I wish to do. I have a second company that operates very similarly. It's more focused on individual well-being. And because of my paramedic things, it's selling first aid products, and 20% of that is going into a fund that will pay for the work and for workers that I employ.
Thank you so much, David.
If I can just add to that, just another couple of seconds to add to that. When I was working with and in NGOs, some of those NGOs were receiving finance like they were only operating for another month, or at the best another year. So the employees in those companies were not only receiving low pay, it wasn't guaranteed any more than for another few months. That is a terrible way to ask people to live, and I would not contribute to that.
Thank you, David. I think that's a wonderful note to finish on. And thank you for a very, very compelling submission. And we wish you well with your work, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, everyone. Next up, we have the Auckland Lawyers Association. I'm pretty sure they're here. So here we are. Welcome to the committee. We're delighted to have you here. Thank you very much for your substantive submission, which Take has read, and please leave time for questions after your presentation.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Carleen O'Halloran. I'm the president of the Auckland Women Lawyers Association, and I'm joined with Erica Burke, who is the vice president of the AWLA. As will have been really clear from our submissions, the AWLA is firmly in opposition of the changes that this government has made to the Equal Pay Act. What we see that there are a lot of issues. Broadly, we are concerned that the threshold has been raised for claims, which effectively is just entrenching pay discrimination in female-dominated sectors of our economy. We see this as unjustifiable, particularly in light of the lack of due process and public consultation and parliamentary debate. And in terms of process, I guess the resounding question for us and I hope for everyone is really why did this need to be passed under urgency? And the Minister of Social Development, I'm just getting some feedback here. So the Minister of Social Development and Employment, Louise Upston, she said that the reason that all of this was passed under urgency was so that we didn't have claims in different processes under different regimes. But firstly, that happens all the time. Basically, she was concerned that the courts would be frustrated. But this happens all the time when processes change and laws change. Courts are well equipped to deal with applying different law relevant to one case versus another. And secondly, that reason didn't really hold much weight when on the very same day the bill was being passed, we had the Deputy Prime Minister, David Seymour, praising Minister Brooke Van Velden for saving the budget for the government. And so we would say that it's glaringly obvious why urgency was used in this case, and that in itself was an abusive process. If the government really believed that there were just some technical improvement processes and a better framework that would result from these amendments, and something that was, more fair and reasonable, then there's no reason to have done this under urgency. There's no reason for it not to go before a select committee, and there was no reason for it to be a rushed process where a bill was introduced and went through all stages of the House in a day. And it's because it wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about making a process better. It was purely about saving money in the short term. But as Erica is going to explain, this is actually going to cost us a lot more money in the long term. And in terms of, I was reading the cabinet paper under the heading of human rights. Certainly the version of it that was before the ministers at the time that this bill was being passed, every single part of the information that you would see in that cabinet paper under human rights was redacted, and the House wasn't given the opportunity to see the reasoning behind passing this bill and the effect that might have on human rights. And we say that this bill does go against human rights. Women's rights to be fairly paid and have equal pay are human rights. And so it's incredibly concerning that the human rights issues in relation to this bill were not able to be considered. Additionally, the departmental disclosure statement stated that there wasn't sufficient time for a regulatory impact statement. I mean, the government brought in this legislation under urgency. They repealed law in a single day. They didn't have a regulatory impact statement. There was no advice on human rights issues. It's frankly a very concerning way of running a democracy. And I think we can probably all agree that worldwide at the moment we're seeing attacks on democracy. And so seeing that happen in New Zealand with fundamental law like the Equal Pay Act is particularly concerning when we're seeing rights for minorities, women, a lot of different groups across the world being rolled back at the moment. The other area I want to talk about is in particular the comparators, and we've obviously gone into the sub, so I'm not going to go too far off that, but essentially the comparative process is going to make every aspect of claiming an equal pay claim harder. The hierarchy of comparators, which has been built into the scheme, was initially suggested by the National Party when it wanted to settle pay equity claims after the Christine Bartlett case. And at that time, the hierarchy scheme was roundly rejected. And that's because when you're looking at a hierarchy of comparators, you're essentially saying that you need to find a comparator in your workplace. And if you can't find a comparator in your workplace, then you need to look at similar jobs. And if you can't look at similar jobs, you need to look at similar industries. And the bureaucracy of trying to find a comparator, which is already very difficult, is exacerbated when you implement this hierarchy of comparators. And that's what is going to make this legislation completely unworkable for low-paid women. Because it's just going to be so easy for comparators to be, ones that are put forward to be shot down. I mean, we had Brooke Van Velden, I think it was, saying, oh, we're going to have librarians wanting to be compared to engineers, which frankly is a classic example of a misogynistic view of value of work that is traditionally perhaps taken by women compared to that taken by men, which kind of just also goes to show that there is so much unconscious bias that is built into this act and, well, into the changes in the act and into the rhetoric around it as well. What the scheme of the act, I guess, also really shows is a lack of appreciation or understanding about the difference between equal pay and pay equity, or certainly at least what is perceived to be the government's understanding of it and the messaging that's been around these changes as well. They're not the same thing. Pay equity is established to it aims to establish pay relative between women-dominated industries and other sectors using specific criteria. It's about ensuring that jobs that are different but are of equal value are paid similarly as a way to achieve gender equality. And that's, again, I think where the messaging has kind of been around, oh, well, these workers can't expect to be paid the same as these other workers. Well, it's not as simple as that. And additionally, the amendments now give employers increased powers to resist claims, and this is further just going to make life really difficult for claimants. It's going to make the process more expensive for them. They're probably going to need to engage a lot of different, I assume, legal advice, but also other work. Sorry, I think I've got a hand up here. Was it for the end?
It's okay. Just we'll ask questions after the presentation.
Okay, great.
We're just getting very keen.
Yes, great. Okay, no problem. Well, what I'll probably do is hand over to Erica, because she's going to talk about, really importantly, what's come about in terms of the constitutional impropriety with the retrospectivity of the Act, and also how that's actually going to affect the gender pay gap. This scheme is going to affect the gender pay gap in New Zealand.
So the presumption that legislation should be forward-looking is a core tenet of our legal system, and it's one that has been blatantly disregarded by the government in passing this Act. There is this general acceptance, as I say, that legislation should be forward-looking in terms of its effect, and it's one that has been described, or that principle is one that's been described by the courts as a simple fairness. It is relatively I think, easy to accept that it is a unfair position to change the law after the fact or after the event, as has been the case in this and with this issue. It's also enforcing impossible standards on the claimants, namely ones that they weren't aware of when they first brought their claim. And as I'll come to in a moment, that's passing on a significant cost in time, effort, and of course money on these claimants who now have to file their claims again, if they even have the ability to do so. So we've also referenced in our submissions the Legislation Act 2019, which is referred to just to highlight the fact again that there is this presumption in law that legislation does not have this retrospective effect. There's also reference to the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee guidelines, which caution again against drafting legislation that would apply retrospectively. Effectively, what this does is undermines or cuts off at the knees the rights and duties that have been accrued to date, and it also places all of the citizens of this country in an uneasy or uncertain state in terms of what their rights are, what the law is at this current time, because by way of imposing retrospective legislation, you've effectively cast doubt on actions or events or laws that have come before. And so that provides essentially all of the elements for an increasingly uncertain time. So we make this point because whilst our focus and our kaupapa is on the rights and advancement of women and children, this actually has widespread constitutional impacts that negatively affect and undermine the rights of all New Zealanders. Carleen has mentioned the lack of regulatory impact statement by MB, which was omitted from this process as well, which again is just another example, blatantly, I think, of the government disregarding due process and due and proper process. Coming now to the cost. So there was reference, obviously, in Carleen's submissions just now on reference to or comments to Nicola Willis saving the budget. The cost in terms of the savings, rather, that have been referred to as some sort of justification for passing through this legislation is completely at odds and it's completely at odds, and it again ignores and disregards the real effect and the real cost that will result. This, the money just changes hands, or the cost just changes hands, really. And there's been no acknowledgement in this process by the government as to who is now going to be footing the bill. And that is these, hundreds and thousands of workers, predominantly women, including teachers, carers, nurses, who have already faced significant cost in bringing their claim and all of the work and effort that takes to do so and to get to the stage that they were at. And there is also, of course, the loss in terms of the cost of wages, which necessitated them bringing the claim for pay equity in the first place. The benefit and the importance of pay equity is that it obviously reduces these gender gaps and ethnic pay gaps for vulnerable employees. These, we've mentioned in our submissions, these claims are increasingly common in sectors where work is, of course, predominantly undertaken by women and has also been marginalised due to these social, historical and cultural factors. We mention and refer to throughout our submissions, of course, on the disproportionate effect that this will have on women. However, the gender pay gap is significantly higher for Wahine Māori, Pacific ethnic and disabled women as well. We can see this by looking at metrics of unemployment, underutilisation and underemployment. And whilst there has been a reduction in the national pay gap in New Zealand, progress has stalled, and this Act, of course, does nothing to improve that, and quite the opposite in our submission. There was also there's also obviously a reference that has been made to how much this act will be saving the government in terms of cost. I think there's a $1.78 billion figure there in our submissions that have been referred to. The real issue, though, is that this will essentially be shifted. This financial burden will be shifted on those lower paid sectors, staffed primarily by women. It will now cost them, as I've mentioned before, significant time and energy and money to resubmit these claims. And as I've mentioned in our submissions, it will essentially cost them about, I think, $17 billion of unpaid wages over the next 4 years. So again, that's been completely omitted from the government's rhetoric. And whilst there was, of course, no opportunity for this to be brought to their attention through the select committee process, it's important that I think that that's raised at this point.
I think as well, what the government's economic argument ignores is that without pay equity, we just generally have less economic activity in general. If women can't afford to spend money in the economy, then that's not going to be it's not going to be good for the economy in the long run. It's going to cost even more. So it's just another example, I think, of where this government is trying to make really short-term wins at the expense of long-term benefits for everyone in society, but in particular it is women, and it is Māori and Pacific and disabled women who are actually our most vulnerable members of society, who are going to take this hit the hardest, and that is deeply concerning.
And there is, just to add to that, just one further comment. When we look at the point Carlene's just made about women not being, participants in the economy, essentially, or contributing to the economy, at one end of the scale, there's the inability to put food on the table, and there's the basic needs that will not be able to be met. But you've also got increasingly, if we look at the other end of the spectrum, or the other end of the scale, women aren't being able to, enter into the property ladder as easily or at all. They're not able to invest. They're not able to, make purchases, etc. Contributed to KiwiSaver. There's a whole range of economic contribution that is just undermined and ignored.
And it just serves to continue to increase that gender pay gap, which, as we've said, has stalled. Also, real issues around affording retirement as well for women. It's we don't know what the government's going to do over the next few years about the age of retirement, and also what pension is going to look like. But I think we've all got the feeling that those benefits are going to reduce, and so that is going to cause another big issue, I would say, to women and the minorities that we've highlighted. So I guess to round it off, what AWLA is saying is that these reforms have completely circumvented due process. They haven't taken into account real world effects for women and the workers that this is going to affect. The justification of saving money is frankly unjustifiable when we're looking at basic, what we say are human rights, to be treated equally, and it's not justifiable to simply shift cost onto the cost burden onto women and workers. It's regression, and it really amounts to a constitutionally dubious attack on women, especially Wahine Māori, Pacifica and disabled women who are going to feel these changes the most deeply.
Thank you so much. In 15 minutes, you have covered so many angles around this, and remarkable detail. That's really appreciated. Now, we have a question from Dame Marilyn and Sue Bradford to follow. Thank you.
Kia ora, Marilyn.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I think probably some of us might have a couple of questions that we'd send to you in writing, because they probably require a little more consideration than we have time for today. In one of your comments in para 7, you talk about making visible the deep structural inequalities that have historically seen women's work undervalued compared with men. And I was also noting that you were talking about people who weren't really understanding how the whole comparator thing worked. And for me, that was, I suppose, in the last day, I used to be on the Reserve Bank board, and if you were appointing the new governor, you didn't have to job size. You knew what the governor did. You know, you knew how to compare academic credentials. You knew how to look at their theses. You knew how to ask what the salaries were of everybody else all around. But in this pay equity process, we're at ground zero. Right, we actually have to build the job description. That's where a lot of this is getting lost. I don't know if you've had any kind of feedback around that, but if you heard Tracy Martin's submission on the first day, you know, when she outlined these are the skills of the care and protection of the care health workers, it's very different from cooking, cleaning and laundry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think broadly as well, when you're using a comparator scheme, and as well in the hierarchy that's suggested, you are already facing an uphill battle because we already have issues with work that is predominantly dealt with and historically considered women's work. It is underpaid anyway, and less value, even from an unconscious bias point of view, is put on that work. So where we have care workers, for example, you know, it's that classic thing of the doctors versus nurses, perhaps, where a similar level of expertise is required, and you know, nurses tend to have a lot of the hands-on care aspect of being a healthcare professional, but that work is more undervalued than the doctor's work. And often there is actually very little difference between what, you know, the knowledge that is held by those two.
Oh, sorry.
But I think, yeah, when you get into comparators, the difficulty is not only finding them, but it's also shifting past systemic unconscious bias and internalized misogyny when you are trying to value work.
I think there's the presumption as well that when there's any element of vocation in terms of work, so particularly with caregiving or nursing, if you know, and teaching as well, that justifies less pay, and that because you're doing it out of the good of your heart, and if there's more hands-on work, as Carlene's mentioned, or work that's associated, you know, traditionally with women, so caring or empathetic elements to a role, that individual woman or those women will accept lower pay because they get something else out of it. And that doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. You can have great satisfaction from your work and providing, you know, caring or emotionally supportive, you know, aspects to your work and still get paid accordingly.
Thank you, Sue Bradford, and we'll sneak in Leanne Dalzell as well, and then it's okay with you if there's any further questions, we submit them in writing to you?
Absolutely.
Right, that's great. Over to you, Sue.
Oh, kia ora, and thanks, because I know there will be further technical questions, because you come from the strong legal background, and thank you very much for both the written and oral submissions. I was just curious, on page 3, and you talked about it a bit about what the cost will be over the next 4 years to women workers. And the figure that the unions have been using and other people advocating around this up to now has been, I think, 12.8 billion. And you've got 17 billion. And I'm really interested in what the basis of that difference is, or how you did talk about the costs, and maybe you're bringing in things that haven't been included by the unions. But I'm quite interested in that difference in the figure.
Yeah, sorry, so I don't have the background research paper that we had with me right now in relation to that figure, but I can definitely come back to you on it. It was made up, from memory, it was made up of a number of different things. Essentially what the Crown was projected to have paid themselves, but also when you're looking at the amount of time that women are spending on these lower wages and the roll-on effect of that as well, while they're waiting for pay equity claims to come through. So that there were a number of different factors that went into it, and that figure was from someone else. We didn't compile it ourselves because we're not economists or particularly good mathematicians, to be honest. But no, I can definitely send you through where that, the factors that went into that figure. But I think to a certain extent it's quite difficult to put a figure on it because there are just so many factors that will go into it, so many different individuals who are going to be having an individual experience from these from the issues that will arise from these amendments, and so I think any figure that's bandied around will likely be on the lower end of an estimate, to be honest. That it will have far-reaching impact, and like Erica said before, when you factor in opportunity cost as well, like being unable to get onto the property market and things like that, then the figure will be extraordinary. So we have 12.5, we have 17, which is grounded in certain factors, but there will always be costs that we simply aren't able to factor in with any real, mathematical certainty. But we know anecdotally that it will cost women far more than what we are probably taking into account.
Kia, thank you.
Okay, and finally, Leanne.
Kia ora, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed reading your submission. You're carrying on a fine tradition. The Auckland Women Lawyers Association has been making submissions on matters of great importance over many, many, many years. But the question that I have for you, and it picks up on your concern about the absence of due process and the constitutional propriety of what's actually occurred here. But in this case, this isn't just a government that's acting retrospectively by removing the 33 pay equity claims. From the evidence that we've received so far, it seems to be that the government itself, through some of its departments and agencies, have actually been specifically and deliberately leading claimants on during a period that this work was hidden behind the scenes as Project 10, as we've found out that it's been described as. Have you got any comments on that and how the government has actually actively promoted people continuing to spend resources on developing pay equity claims when in fact they're working behind the scenes to dump them all?
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking into this, I was looking through government papers that saw that all of these amendments were being discussed actually quite some time ago. And so for certain politicians, that they were well aware that all of this was happening. And it's concerning when you did have that, some of the same ministers who are pushing this through were also ministers who were not too long ago saying that they were champions of equal pay and advocating for women. And so I think there is a real concern there that there's this level of it feels very improper, doesn't it? Because
it does.
Because they know the process as well, actually better than anyone in terms of how the government should be bringing in laws. And as you say, to lead these claimants on is to cause them time, money, and labour. And there's an inherent unfairness too, that all those claimants all that time would have been compiling their own submissions, their own research, they'd be engaging experts. None of those steps really, we're presuming the government took. They might have been talking amongst themselves about it, but they weren't getting the statements, they weren't going through the process. So it's I'd love to say that I was more surprised, but I think the point arguably you could make for all of this, is that women are not supported to be economically, or they're not supported economically, and to be equal contributors to the economy. And so those actions you've described that they've been taking align with that. And I think as well, if there was a select committee process, that if the usual process was done, then those groups would know, okay, maybe we're not going to put as many resources into this right now until we know that, that the law is going to stay as it is, or what the battleground is actually going to look like. But instead they, obviously did it under urgency, and it's just resulted in claims being absolutely scrapped and people having to start from ground zero once again. So the worst view of it is that it was done on purpose, and it's meant that these groups have paid money towards endeavours that are ultimately going to be useless, and that drains their funds, and it's going to mean that they have less of a chance of making a claim under the new scheme. At best, it was a very unfair oversight. It's probably somewhere in the middle, more towards, I would say, just given the way that this government has been operating and the fact that they've passed more laws under urgency than any other government, I think since 1987, I think it is at the moment. And it begs the question, why haven't they got their act together? Why can't they use a normal democratic process? And as I briefly mentioned at the beginning of my oral submissions, it's following a dangerous trend that we're seeing across the world, where democratic rights are being rolled back. And I don't think anybody wants New Zealand to be anywhere near that kind of concern. We love to see ourselves as a progressive society. It's often really good that we can get laws passed relatively quickly compared to the rest of the world, but that doesn't mean that we should be doing them under urgency. It also just dilutes the what urgency actually is. We have urgency provisions for a reason, and when you are just using them to pass through any law that you want, to me it seems that there needs to be a little bit more guidance on when and how urgency can be used. Obviously we have parliamentary sovereignty as one of our big constitutional tenets in this country, but it probably begs the question as to why are we allowing urgency to be used on such a frequent basis that it surely can't be seen as urgency anymore.
Thank you so much. That's actually a great note to end on. Thank you. We really, really appreciate both your oral presentation and your written submission, and also the research that's gone into your submissions, and would really appreciate any copies of research or any work that you've done.
Will do. We'll look forward to your questions.
Okay. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye. Okay, and next we have Tanya from Koga.
Kia ora.
Welcome, Tanya. Hello again.
Yes, looking a little bit different this time.
Good to see you. Thank you for your submission, which you can take as read, and please leave some time for questions.
Okay, so yeah, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Tanya de me tōku ingoa, ko Taranaki te whenua tupu, ko Tamaki Makaurau te kāinga, ngā mihi nui ki te mana wahine o te committee. I and thousands of people are very grateful to you, mana wahine, for your time, energy and tremendous hard work on behalf of pay equity and democracy in Aotearoa. I am a researcher, policy analyst, feminist activist and mother of three. I founded Koga in 2014, a research and evaluation agency that works across multiple sectors. I'm also a co-founder of Project Gender, which is a feminist research and campaign agency, and a co-founder of the Backbone Collective, a survivor-led violence against women charitable trust. So I'll be speaking today in support of the over 213,000 single parent whānau in Aotearoa, the vast majority of whom are women, and also victim survivors of intimate partner violence and sexual violence. It's important that these voices are heard as part of this hearing, and as someone who was herself raised by a solo mother in the 70s, it's an honour to represent them. In 2023, Project Gender, in partnership with Ngāti Kahanunu, delivered the Mako Mama Mangopare Single Parents Report, drawing on the testimony of over 3,500 single mothers. The Mako Mama report provides stark insights into the stigma and discrimination faced by single mothers and identifies urgent changes required to achieve equity for single parents in Aotearoa. The report makes 82 recommendations for structural and systemic change across government, communities and the private sector. Mako Mama Mangopare represents the largest data set in Aotearoa about what's happening on the ground, essentially, for single parent whānau. And it's fair to say that there are a huge number of challenges that many are navigating. The Equal Pay Amendment Act 2025 will worsen inequality for low-income women, many of whom are single mothers, and exacerbate many of the hardships that wahine and their tamariki are navigating every single day. Single parent households are obviously reliant on one income. Given the significant barriers to paid work that already exist for single mothers, it is critical that when they do manage to secure a job, they are paid fairly for the work they do. The legislative change brought in on the 7th of May by the current government has just made that less likely. So here's a snapshot of some of what is happening for single mothers. Access to employment is difficult for single mama. They are more reliant on childcare than partnered parents, and the astronomical cost of childcare in Aotearoa represents a significant barrier to paid work. Single mothers are very often in insecure, part-time or low-wage roles because of a range of overlapping factors, and access to affordable childcare being a critical one. Our research uncovered the high levels of discrimination experienced by single mothers who are often treated unfairly or discriminated against by employers. Single mothers are vastly more likely to live in poverty based on recent Stats NZ Household Economic Survey data. Single parents have experienced severe trauma, so the 2/3 of the 3,500 single mothers we heard from in the Mako Mama project had experienced intimate partner violence, and for 8 out of 10 of these respondents, this was perpetrated by the parent of their child or children, and 1/3 of those in this sample still found it difficult to keep themselves safe from someone they used to be in an intimate relationship with, and 23%, just under a quarter, found it difficult to keep their child or children safe. I would also like to speak to the process that the government followed to pass this law under urgency, in secret, with no public scrutiny, claiming that the new legislation makes the process of raising and resolving pay equity claims more robust, workable and sustainable, saying that there's nothing to see here. The process that this government followed mirrors the classic tactics of an abuser. It denies women's voices and lived realities of hardship in a system that persistently ignores them. It minimises the impact of its action on women and their children, trivialising the value of women's paid and unpaid labour. It also minimises the absence of systemic support, such as affordable childcare, fair wages and accessible pathways that single mothers need in order to engage in decent, secure work. And it minimises the system's own responsibility for these factors, for these failures. It gaslights women who are told, you can raise a claim, nothing is stopping you. In fact, we're making, the process easier and more streamlined. What's wrong with you? Instead, blame is shifted onto women themselves for choosing to stay in low-paid jobs, for choosing to have children, and for not simply fitting into an economic structure designed without them in mind and actually stacked against them. On behalf of single mothers and victim survivors, I call on this government, and if not this government, then the next government, to re-engage with the process of achieving pay equity in Aotearoa. I also urge the government to engage meaningfully with those most affected, just as this People's Select Committee is currently doing, through dialogue with women, with unions, with tangata whenua, with tangata whaikaha, with LGBTQI+ communities, before making decisions that impact them. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'll call for questions now, and a very, very compelling submission, and really what wonderful work you're doing. It's so good to have you here. Leanne Dalziel has a question.
Kia ora, thank you so much for your submission. And I was listening to it and I was thinking, the sort of the gaslighting, the trivializing of issues, and I recall a report that was done when I first entered Parliament back in the 1990. I entered Parliament, and it talked about the trivialization of the risks that women faced in domestic violence situations, and to hear that word trivializing in this context just seems so utterly appropriate. So thank you for raising that. I kind of wanted to just take a slightly different tack onto I don't know, my perception of irony. But the leader of the ACT Party has been pursuing this deregulation agenda, and wanting to ensure that ministers develop regulatory impact analysis that sustains regulatory reform in any way, shape or form. But this one didn't have a regulatory impact analysis, and it went straight through all of its stages in Parliament. We're a unicameral Parliament. We're not like other countries in that there are checks and balances. One of the checks and balances that we have is the Select Committee process. So that was just a general blah, but is there anything in there that you'd like to comment on?
Well, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think because this was, to do with women, women's work, women-dominated industries, it's just not regarded, as important enough to actually go through the same democratic processes and constitutional processes. And I think, that is outraging as well. And I certainly hope when it comes time to vote in next year's election, people may not care very much about women or gender equity, but surely they should care about our democratic processes being absolutely trampled on. And that's certainly the message that we at Project Gender will be pushing very, very hard.
Thank you, Tanya. We've had a final question from Steve Chadwick, and as I've asked others, is it fine with you if there's further questions they're submitted in writing?
Yes, please. Yes, yeah. We have so much research we would love to share.
Well, we'd appreciate anything you've got. Feel free to send it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Steve.
Thank you, Tanya. I think I'd love to hear your reaction. It's a bit like Leanne. When we heard from there's usually a code of kindness around women MPs supporting something that impacts so badly on women. What do you think happened with and I won't name them, the other MPs in the House that said, don't worry, we've still got pay equity, it's all right, it's going to be simpler. How do you think we would contradict that position?
Yes, it's very, very disappointing, and those same women MPs are still going out and making public pronouncements about how wonderful this current government is in terms of women and gender equity. I find I'm always very reluctant to kind of, throw women on the bus for under the bus for sort of not being feminist enough. Just because, someone is a woman doesn't necessarily mean that, they're going to share our same values. But and to be quite honest, I have some empathy for some of them, because I think they were rolled out to sort of sanitize, this action. Look, women are supporting it. There's nothing to see here. Calm down. What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with what we're doing. But yeah, and I understand too. Within the civil service, it's women who are kind of pushing this agenda as well. So there is something in that. I just wouldn't want to sort of go down that line where we're attacking women MPs only. At all. That's very, very dangerous. And I think we hold this entire coalition government to account for this.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Really, really appreciate your submission, and we look forward to receiving further information from you. Thank you so much.
You'll see more activism from us as well, Lynn.
Well, you keep it up.
I'm not as colourfully dressed as I was when you last saw me.
You look great.
Okay. Thank you again. Bye.
Just for the committee, Tanya was at the pay equity rally in full costume, and she looked amazing.
I was dressed as the ghost of pay equity with my dear co-founder Ange. Yeah, it was great. Yeah,
it was very colourful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Lillian Pack and Kate with her from Team Nainai Trust.
Oh, actually, it's just me as me personally, not from Team Nainai Trust.
Oh, lovely to meet you. Welcome, and take your submission as read. And we're very keen to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Lillian tōku ingoa. So my name is Lillian, and I'm a citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand by grant. I'll introduce Kate in a little while because she is my primary source. So thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to speak to my written submission. I wasn't going to speak today, but I decided that I must. And I must because when this government undemocratically scrapped pay equity under urgency, it undermined every woman in this country. It told us that our voices weren't important, and it devalued us. So I'm here to speak for my mom, who was a care and support worker when I was very young. She worked long hours around the clock for minimum wages, struggling to make ends meet. Missing out on quality time with her family, like with me. And yeah, so I'm also here to speak for my daughter, who's now a teenager. She's wondering about her future career choices. And it makes me really sad because from the questions she's asking me, I know that she's wanting a job where she'll receive fair pay, be respected, and can live a life of dignity. And it's heartbreaking because I always ask her what she enjoys doing, and she said it doesn't matter. What matters is that she will get fair pay for what she's doing. And so she can't follow her passion, and she can't be fairly rewarded for doing that. So I'm also here to speak for workers. So as someone, I used to work in education and libraries. I know how inequitably women are paid in women-dominated industries. When I was in libraries, I was paid 40% less than when I was in education management. And when I was in education, I was paid up to 30% less than other educators. And that was because I was in areas such as languages and social services, so counseling, social work, mental health support, disability support. So industries that are women dominated. Currently, I am a union organizer. I do this because I want to stand up for other women. And I represent many hundreds of women in women dominated industries. They're amazing. They're amazing people. They work hard. They work long hours at all hours, and they are paid what I consider poverty wages. They struggle to make ends meet. They tell me they have to go to the food bank or skip meals so they can feed their own families. They have to decide which bills to pay, which to put off for another week. And sometimes they struggle because they can't pay any bills that week. And then it's even more heartbreaking because sometimes their work conditions put them at risk, at huge risk. So I have members who tell me they've been punched. They've been punched in the face, they've been groped, they've been verbally abused, they've been sexually assaulted. So that's why I brought Kate. As a former educator, I know how important it is to have a primary source. And so I'm going to hand it over to Kate, my primary source. And I just also want to thank her because she's, as much as I support her, she supports me in what I do. Okay, Ms. Lynn?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a support worker for Aotearoa Lower North Island. I was asked to do this on short notice, but if I go back to the 6th of May, it was shorter notice. I remember the day well. The announcement of all 33 pay equities stopped. Rules changed. My phone rang red hot from support workers asking if it was true. Unfortunately, it was. We were all so angry, words were said that I will not repeat. Tears of anger and frustration was common when we were talking amongst each other. A bond was formed to fight any way we could. I was also in Parliament with other support workers when it was announced that 12.8 billion was saved off the back of us hardworking women. Words again couldn't describe my feelings or theirs. 5 months down this track, we are still angry and frustrated on how this government are treating us low-paid working women. With the cost of living on the rise, we support workers are lucky if we are making ends meet. We are chasing more hours of work just to make ends meet. MSD is seeing a lot of us. I would love to know the figures of how many low-paid women whose pay equity claims were thrown out are now relying on payments from MSD to keep the roof over their heads and food on the table. As support workers, the pay we make is a slap in the face. We use our own cars to get to clients. The wear and tear, high case, tyre replacement, oil changes, maintenance, on our cars is bloody high. Oh yeah, we get paid in between travel, but it does not cover the cost of what we have to get done to our cars. They have to be roadworthy as we are driving in all kinds of weather and road conditions. We are dealing with clients who have MS, Parkinson's, dementia, stroke, tetraplegic, hip replacements, you name it, we are doing it. This is all to give them the quality of life so they can enjoy seeing their families or doing the things that they like. Why our support workers are putting on smiles on our faces and acting happy and life is all good, but in reality, we are hoping we have enough petrol in the car to get to the next house, and is there enough food to feed my family to next payday? We support workers are first responders as well. We walk into houses where people are having strokes, heart attacks, have fallen with concussion, broken hips, or the aftermath of domestic violence. We help district nurses with clients by moving, holding, or helping so they can get to their next client. If they can't make it to do a change of a dressing, we end up doing it. Ambulance officers with clients, passing on our knowledge of the client and helping them move or assist them. Doctors who come in thinking we are nurses and expecting to help again. Occupational therapists, physiotherapists, the list goes on. All this for minimum wage with qualifications because we care. We wash, dress, medicate, feed, document, become their ear that listens when they are down. We get yelled at, hit, and abused. We give the dying their last wishes to be at home, all for minimum wage. When we started our pay equity claim over 3 years ago, that has now been cancelled and can't start again until 2027, we support workers have missed out on over 23,000 to date in pay, and this figure is growing day by day. If pay equity had not been stopped, but had gone through, our lives would be so much better now. Bills paid, wafts on cars, warm homes, real smiles on our faces, looking forward with hope and dreams of a better future with dignity, instead of the shame we feel of not being able to do the very basics with our kids and family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for a really, really compelling presentation, and Kate, particularly your description of the mahi that you do, and take it from us, we have total respect and admiration for you, and as far as we're concerned, your work is really, really, really valuable, and I'm sorry that this has happened and that government's treated workers this way. I'm going to call for some questions now, but could I also ask that you, Kate, your submission that you've just given, if we could have a copy of that and any other research and that you've presented, we'd love it. Thank you. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then if we have Dane, Marilyn Waring, Sue Bradford and Rhea Bond for questions, that will probably use our time. Thank you very much. Over to you, Marilyn.
Kia ora, thank you very much indeed for your submission. And I really appreciate your descriptions, Kate. Now, you've got a comment in the middle of your submission. Aotearoa, New Zealand was known for being a world leader on pay equity. I wonder, Lillian, if you could expand on that.
So one of the reasons why I came to New Zealand was because at the time we had a female prime minister and a female opposition leader of the opposition. We had quite a few female MPs and we had cabinet ministers who were female. And I had read this article when I was living in Japan about how wonderful this place was and how progressive New Zealand was with regards to equity and equality. And so they explained about, all these women in positions of influence. And they also said that in New Zealand that they were moving closer to pay equity and fair pay, so that people were being paid what they're worth and being valued, and that the pay gap, even though there was a bit of a pay gap, that was smaller than other countries. So out there, outside of New Zealand has that reputation for pay equity and for providing that fair pay and being a more equitable society than a lot of other countries. And so I purposely picked Aotearoa, New Zealand, to the horror of my family, because I was born and raised in Canada, and they're fairly equitable, but New Zealand beat out Canada, and that's why I'm here.
Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, Lillian and Kate, thanks so much for your very moving submission and for all the information that you've shared with us. It's been such a tough time. I was really interested that you raised, Kate, the situation of your workers, your co-workers, having to go to supplements. We don't have, or I haven't heard other submitters talking about this. I could be wrong, I may have missed it, but I'm really interested in this, and I know that as individuals and as workers, as a union even, you don't have the resources to catch that information about how many people might be having to increase the accommodation supplement or go ask, get a higher benefit from working income because of the loss of hours and the ongoing loss of income that's going to happen. But I just think any stories about that, or if you have any information through the union work or otherwise to hand, like just the stories of it, it would be quite good for us to have those if there was any supplementary information about that, because I think it's such a huge issue. Whether it's very hard to get that information from anywhere, including MSD, but even the stories of what's happening for a few people could be quite useful. And I just wondered if that might be possible.
I can go back to these people who have come to me as being a delegate for the PSA and ask them if it's all right if I use their information and see if they want to attach their names to it. If they don't, I'd ask them to be anonymous.
We wouldn't expect names. Totally understand that. But just that information is really useful because it is part of the whole picture.
We can provide that because I get stories, I get members calling every day, and every day it breaks my heart. What supporting care workers have to go through.
Kia ora. Yes, it's so shocking every time to hear this. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Lillian and Kate. Lillian, I really want to let you know that I really appreciate your story, especially giving us your history about your mother taking or being in the care and support worker sector. And I'm interested when you mention your daughter and how she would love a job or has a passion to work as long as the equal pay provisions were provided. And you furthermore spoke about where you come from and how you arrived to New Zealand. I'm wondering, given the Pay Equity Amendment Act 2025, how do you think this will affect our future young ladies coming into lower paid workforce? And do you think this has harmed our international reputation of New Zealand being a country that looks after their women?
That's quite interesting because I know with my daughter, she's asking, is there a better country out there? Because she sees what's happening, and she's 14. She hears things at school, and she goes to her friend's house and she hears the parents talking. Like, she doesn't mean to eavesdrop, but she hears things, and she knows that it's tough for a lot of people out there at the moment, and she understands pay equity. She came to the Women's Day of Action on Saturday, and so she said, well, obviously New Zealand is failing. Like, Aotearoa, New Zealand is failing its women. Are there better countries? She's like, should we go back to Canada or should we go to Europe? And so she's done research. Should we go to Finland? Should we go to Iceland? And so that's where she's kind of at. So, and when I asked her, she said it's not just her, it's her friends as well, her peers. They're all looking. And so that's a huge brain drain. Not just say that my child is, but she is very intelligent, and I think she can make quite a contribution. I mean, she organized the school strike, for example, when she was 7, and she was in a documentary. So, and I want her to stay in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but she may go, and it breaks my heart because I would love to be where she is. And she knows because, we used to always talk about how proud we were, of being here and things like fair pay and pay equity. And the high school that I went to, I had one of my colleagues, former classmates, is now a diplomat for the Canadian government, and she asked me about pay equity. Because before I took this job, I was in a role where I helped with putting together contracts with suppliers for the New Zealand government, and I worked with Amy Ross's team on getting, pay equity pacelines. And now, my friend had emailed me and said, "Oh, how terrible it must be because pay equity is gone in Aotearoa." Because she was asking me, like, who would I talk to? Can I get advice? And now it's like, oh well, you guys are I can't remember the phrase, but basically hurtling to the bottom. Is something similar to that? Yeah. And that breaks my heart because I am very proud to be here and to be a citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Thank you so much for your response.
And thank you so much for a wonderful submission. I'm sorry I got lost technically for a moment there, and but really I know the committee really appreciated it, and we look forward to further information. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Next team, we have Joe Wrigley from Go Eco, I think, Waikato. Kia ora, Joe. Welcome.
Kia ora.
Can you see? Are you receiving us?
Yes.
Great. I've lost your face for some reason. There we are. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming along. Please take your submission as read, and please, if you can, leave some time for questions after your presentation. Over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Joe Wrigley tōku ingoa, he Pākehā au kei te noho au ki Waikato. I'm coming to this kōrero from the heart of community and environmental mahi, spaces where connection is everything. I'm grounded by whanaungatanga and in the understanding that our relationships between people, whenua and systems are the things that sustain us. Today, I also want to tautoko wahine Māori, Pacifica, migrant and working class, disabled and queer communities whose voices you have heard and whose labour holds our society together but is constantly undervalued. I bring a deep belief in our collective power to build something better. I work alongside those who do this kind of mahi, and it's a kind of mahi that is definitely not flashy, but it absolutely is essential, and caregivers, community organisers, environmental restorers, their work is grounded in manaakitanga and caring for others and ensuring collective well-being, but our systems actually don't reflect the value. Instead, this work is seen as often as cheap, expendable, invisible, or in our sector, simply unpaid. When you live at the intersection of gender, race, and class inequity, you see how deeply the system resists acknowledging the worth of this labour. That's why I think this matters, because we can't claim to care about equity while ignoring the work that actually holds our communities up. For too long, we've been told that the pay gap is just a numbers problem. But when you strip it back, when you look at pay inequity, it is actually a structural injustice built on colonialism, capitalism, and white supremacy. It's not just about wages. It's about who gets to define the value, who holds the power, and whose labour is seen as essential. We're told that pay equity is being handled, well, at least by the government, and that the laws are in place and that process is working. But when we look critically, we see the truth, and that is that our current framework isn't built for justice, it's built for compliance. It puts all of the burden on workers to prove their value, forces the unions into endless bureaucratic battles, and centres the advancement of already privileged groups. This is not equity. It is a technical fix that leaves the roots of inequality untouched. I'm a big fan of Mātiki Mai, and I think that Mātiki Mai reminds us that real change comes from reflection and insight, not just legal reform. The Equal Pay Amendment Act of 2020 was a step forward, but it was wrapped in red tape, technical hurdles, and neoliberal logic. It places the burden on already exhausted workers and under-resourced unions to prove their worth. Meanwhile, the employers resist, the government deflects, and the most precarious people in our communities are left behind. If we need to name what's really going on, it would be a system of capitalism that sees care as unprofitable, colonialism that pushes Māori and Pacific and global majority workers into undervalued labour, and a history of white supremacy that lifts some of us while sidelining others. I'd like to see a new vision. It's a time to imagine a system that honours rangatiratanga, not just in rhetoric but in structure. A system where Māori lead the design of equity frameworks and where decision making is shared and where tikanga guides our understanding of value. It's a system that doesn't just slot people into an unjust economy but transforms that economy altogether. The Mātiki Mai vision gives us pathway, power sharing, relational governance, and a future shaped by both rangatiratanga and kawanatanga working in balance. We need to shift from individual wage comparisons to collective well-being and structural redistribution. That's the vision of real equity. To do this, and acknowledging that that is a long vision, we also need transformation for a new vision that is underpinned by expanding equity to cover community and non-profit sectors, sector-wide bargaining, not employer by employer skirmishes, public investment in relational and ecological labour, and above all, a shift from market parity to structural redistribution. We already know this transformation won't happen through isolated claims or polite requests. It will take otahitanga and collective action. I would like to think that we can unite across sectors, identities, and roles to demand that care work, environmental restoration, and community building are valued and resourced. So for me, finally, pay equity is not just an economic issue, it's a kaitiaki issue. We have a responsibility to uphold the dignity of all workers, especially those doing the care and the community work that capitalism routinely devalues. We must protect not only the rights of the workforce today, but the futures of those who come next. When we embed Mātiki Mai values, such as whanaunatanga, manaakitanga, rangatiratanga, kotahitanga, kaitiakitanga, into our pay equity framework, we honour the full spectrum of what justice could look like in Aotearoa. So it's not just about fixing a broken system, it's actually about building a new one, grounded in relationship, in respect, and in collective strength. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you so much, Jo, for a very, very extensive submission and certainly some food for thought. Could we have a copy of the submission that you've just, your oral submission? We'd really appreciate that. And we've got time for a couple of quick questions. Perhaps if we have Ria Bond and Sue Bradford and Jo. And then we'll have to close questions because we're running pretty close to schedule. Thank you.
Kia ora, Jo. I'll be quite quick on my question. Your submission was massive and it took me some time to go through it and resonate with the concerns that you had in there just to get my head full of what you were articulating. What I'm interested in is your view. In the 2020 Pay Equal Amendment Act, the phasing in of settlements was deemed to be unlawful by ministers and at that time. And in our 2025 Pay Equity Amendment Act, phasing in pay equity seems to be considered a normal reactor and a process. What's your view on that? Given prior, it was deemed to be, I guess for the B word, unlawful.
I think the phasing in, I'm not a legal expert, so I can't state whether I believe it's lawful or not. I think it's a constructed barrier to actually achieving pay equity, and it's one that's persistent. That we keep treating equity and justice as something that can be incremental, and actually incrementalism kills people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Bradford.
Oh, kia ora, Jo. Thank you for taking the time to write such a substantial kind of meta overview from this quite broad perspective, which I really appreciate, and it's a real gift to the committee. I'm really interested because of your strong community sector background. Have you been aware of community sector groups in your rohe or elsewhere where there's been a tension between groups of workers who have benefited from pay equity settlements, like registered social workers, and workers who are doing the same or very similar work but have not been able to benefit from settlements, or may have been stopped in their tracks by what happened earlier this year, like, you know, of that, or any other impacts in the community sector by what's happened, like direct impacts?
Yeah, so absolutely that exists. So through government funded projects, or the delivery of government funded projects in environmental and social sectors, where people are required to have the same qualifications in order to deliver that work or to support their communities. But pay equity isn't part of the funding model. At best, in the community sector, we strive for living wage minimums. But actual pay equity based on qualification and service is not achievable through donations and philanthropic funding.
Kia ora.
Thank you. And very quickly, we're running out of time, but Jo has a question and we'd love to hear it, Jo.
Thank you, Lynn, and kia ora, Jo. Thank you very much for your great submission. Actually, I really enjoyed reading it. Your Mātiki Mai constitutional transformation section bearing in mind, and I love it, I've seen it often actually, but bearing in mind we're dealing with a government that seems to be crushing everything that has to do with tikanga Māori and te reo. You know, what would be your thoughts on going forward, and also bearing in mind they also have this government seems to be upholding the settlement process that's already gone through the treaty settlements and being able to embed those tikanga. Yet, yeah, how would you like to see it going forward if there was a repeal of this piece of legislation under Mātiki Mai?
I think what Mātiki Mai and Moana Jackson recommended of that, and the ongoing work of Margaret Mutu, is that this is a piece of work that has been said, the foundation has been set, and now all that needs to happen is for it to be carried forward. I think there's space in civil engagement. I think there's space in unions to carry it forward, and kotahitanga movements, and the community sector, and in pushing for it within our current Western system of government for better conversations, for sure. I think it provides a set of values that are foundational to the future of Aotearoa and what it is that we want to believe the values of our country are. And at the moment, those aren't embedded anywhere. I want to shout out to the new conversations that's happening, and while it irks me that they've dropped Mātiki Mai out of the conversation for constitutional transformation is still an important one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Really, really appreciated your submission and the coming along. And as I said before, anything that you can send us in writing would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, I'll just send through my speech notes to the
Lovely.
email. That's
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, bye-bye. Right, the committee now will take a wee break. We're a little bit behind time, but is 3 or 4 minutes okay? To about 10:40, 10:41? Yep. Okay, thanks everyone. And Kia ora and welcome back to the People's Select Committee. We're moving through our submissions after a very short break, and I'd like to welcome Rights Aotearoa. I think Paul, is Paul with us?
Yes, I am.
Kia ora, welcome Paul.
Welcome, thank you very much.
Good to see you. Yep,
good to see.
Hop straight into it.
Great. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Paul Thestol, CEO and founder of Rights Aotearoa. Rights Aotearoa is a non-governmental organisation focused on promoting and defending the universal human rights of all Kiwis. We have a particular focus on the rights of transgender, non-binary and intersex New Zealanders, and also in hate speech law reform. We used to be called Countering Hate Speech. It is an immense honour to be in front of such incredible people on the People's Select Committee today, this morning, and I am in awe of you personally and your amazing achievements. Now, before I begin the substance of our submission, I want to provide an update to the committee on a legal matter. I am currently making vigorous efforts to get the human rights analysis in the cabinet paper from the Minister's office, which is, as Carleen from the Auckland Women Lawyers Society said, completely redacted at the moment. As Ombudsman processes are completely confidential, I can't say more other than my efforts are exceedingly active. And I want to signal to the committee as well that I am considering a judicial review of the Minister's decision in this matter. The refusal to disclose this analysis, especially when the Act was rushed through under urgency, speaks volumes. The right for the public to know the human rights analysis outweighs the professional legal privilege, in my opinion. And at minimum, in my view, the Minister should prepare a summary. I will keep the committee updated on my ongoing tussles in this regard. And if any of you know of a judicial review barrister who has some pro bono time up their sleeve, please tell me. So, I want to start today by framing what is fundamentally at stake. Now, this is a very important point. The focus of human rights law is what we take with us necessarily from the private into public spaces. And most of us wake up in the morning and we have to venture into the public square and outside our house to make a living. That's a basic fact of life. We can't leave our age, gender, race, or religious identity at the door. So in a kind of existential sense, the basic nature of the economy forces us into being discriminated against. And thus, this is a very important point, pay equity is the most important of all the societal anti-discrimination measures. It is without a doubt the one that has the biggest effect and is the most important, because we are all, unless we're born into intergenerational wealth, forced into the marketplace of ideas and the economy. It is the recognition of human dignity and the equal value of all work in the public sphere. It is not fair nor just that you should have to subject yourself to discrimination in order to be an economically productive person. So the 2025 Act doesn't just fail to advance this principle, it actively dismantles it by design. And it does so through mechanisms that reveal a profound misunderstanding of modern workplaces and the people who inhabit them, in my opinion. Most egregiously, this Act enforces a rigid gender binary that erases entire categories of workers. The framework demands that work be classified as either male or female dominated, with thresholds now raised to 70%. But what if the transgender woman in healthcare who faces both transphobic discrimination and the systemic undervaluation of her woman-dominated profession? What if the non-binary educator whose very existence challenges the binary category this law demands? And what if Takatapui, whose understanding of gender predates colonial binary frameworks? And I'd just like to point out this Act has come just before the Law Commission recommending in its Ia Tangata report that gender identity, or its equivalents in the culture of the person, and innate variations of sex characteristics should be added explicitly into Section 21 of the Human Rights Act. So based on Stats New Zealand's last census and the prevalence of intersex conditions, just over 2% of Aotearoa's population is transgender, non-binary, or has an innate variation of sex characteristics. And those numbers are almost certainly underreported. This Act erases those people. Now, this isn't merely a technical failing, and this is where I come to our binding international human rights obligations. This Act is a fundamental breach of 3 major international treaties. The first, under the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, New Zealand committed to the progressive realisation of rights. We actively said back in the past, we must always go forward. Any deliberately retrogressive measure, which this Act unquestionably is, requires extraordinary justification, a war or a pandemic, etc. This government has provided none. It's hard to see this law as anything other than purely an anti-worker ideological move. Now, very importantly for the current korero, Article 2.2 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights covers all forms of discrimination. The wording is exceptionally wide by design. It says, and other forms of discrimination. So the government is committed to ending intersectional discrimination in all forms of the public sphere under this international covenant. Now, the UN Committee has been clear. Retrogression is only permissible if it is temporary, necessary, non-discriminatory, and protects minimum core obligations. This Act fails every single criterion. It is permanent. It was driven by political choice, not necessity. It discriminates against cisgender women, gender and ethnic minorities. And it eliminates rather than protects core obligations. Now to the second international treaty that this Act violates. It violates the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which requires states to ensure effective protection of women against discrimination. Instead, we now have a system where employers can unilaterally declare no appropriate comparators exist and terminate a claim. We have given those who benefit from the discrimination veto power over its investigation. And lastly, the process by which this Act was passed compounded these violations. So Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights guarantees all of us the right to participate in public affairs by using urgency to bypass all consultation, all scrutiny, all democratic input. The government violated this fundamental right of all of us. No select committee, no submissions from the 300,000 plus affected workers, not even consultation with Māori, despite clear treaty obligations. So this law breaches at least 3 international treaties. And of course, this Act represents a profound breach of our local treaty Te Tiriti. Wahine Māori are dramatically overrepresented in the undervalued occupations the system was beginning to address. The principle of equity requires the Crown to actively address disparities affecting Māori. Instead, it has chosen to entrench them. The principle of partnership required consultation on matters affecting their interests. Instead, their voices were completely excluded. Committee members, what we're discussing today isn't merely bad policy, it's a moral failure that diminishes us all. When we deny equal pay for work of equal value, we're saying that some people's labour, some people's contribution to society is inherently worth less because of who they are. And we spent 70 years after World War II building up this wonderful tapestry of international obligations and treaties and covenants to try and get this through to all the UN member states. And we now seem to be going backwards. And that was a point that the Auckland Women Lawyers Society made too. When we reinforce rigid gender binaries that exclude our transgender and non-binary whānau, we're saying their work doesn't count. Their struggles don't matter. Their dignity isn't worth protecting. Now, as Erica from the Auckland Women Lawyers Society once again said, the economic irrationality of this is matched only by its cruelty. Treasury's own analysis showed that closing gender pay gaps would increase GDP, reduce child poverty, and strengthen economic resilience. So I close with this. Rights Aotearoa calls for the complete repeal of this act and the immediate reinstatement of all discontinued claims and review mechanisms. But beyond that, I would like this wonderful committee to call for genuine transformation, for a new system to be put in place, for a pay equity system that recognises all genders, addresses all discrimination, and delivers justice for all workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you for the compliment on your opening. And I'd just like to repay it. I think it would be fair to say that the committee's pretty much in awe of you. That was a wonderful submission.
Thank you.
If we could have your notes, that would be really appreciated.
Certainly can.
I'll just, I have a question from Marilyn Waring and then Steve Chadwick. And then I think there could be other questions. Are you happy if we submit them in writing?
I would be more than pleased to answer any questions from this wonderful committee.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Kia ora, Paul, and thank you very much. We've had a number of submitters who have mentioned various human rights obligations, ILO conventions, Economic, Social and Cultural Covenant in particular, Convention on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. But you're one of the only ones, I think possibly the first, who's mentioned the ICCPR, though you're talking about Section 25.
Yes.
Now, I'm really interested in a combination, and I'm presuming you're familiar, you'll understand me. So if you combine Articles 2, 3, and 26
of the ICCPR. Yeah.
You get a direct discrimination on the grounds of sex, right? So we've got an inclusion in terms of Article 26 there.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm asking this question is because the Human Rights Committee in a long ago communication, but nonetheless it still holds, Brooks in the Netherlands, the Netherlands argued that the rights being impugned were economic, social and cultural rights, and the committee said, no, there's real clear sex discrimination here. This is immediately enforceable.
I agree. I think that what you're pointing to is that a number of these UN instruments actually cover these in different ways and with different wordings. So the ICCPR definitely gives you that discrimination on the basis of sex, but the International Covenant, and I'm always getting this wrong, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, because of the way Article 2.2 is worded and says discriminations by all other measures, it definitely includes gender identity. So you have, I think, a variety of ways to approach the issue under the UN frameworks.
Right, thank you. Over to you, Steve, finally.
Sorry.
Oh, Paul, that was...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I just really want to follow up. Except that economic, social and cultural rights are only enforceable as economic circumstances allow. And civil and political rights are immediately enforceable. So you can, so waiting for 10 years is just fine under economic, social and cultural rights. But you can keep arguing until the day is done that you don't have the money. But civil and political is different.
Very good. Yeah. And then I would say that what you would then do is you would take the ICCPR and its transposition into New Zealand law, you could then use the Crown Law 2006 opinion to say that gender identities cover under the word sex in the ICCPR. Yeah, but I'm not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer, but you are very well versed on matters of UN treaties, Dame Marilyn.
I'm just
minorities have to be.
Yes.
I'm a little bit concerned about time. Steve, would you be happy to submit your question in writing?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate your submission. As you can see, there's a lot of interest, and there'll be more questions following in writing, and we look forward for an update on your progress.
Okay, you will, and I will definitely give that update to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and then now we're over to the Good Shepherd, please.
Morena. Thank you. Good
morning.
Good morning. Just going to
this-
wait for my colleague to appear as well. This is Koima Tokuingoa from Good Shepherd. I'm the outgoing Chief Executive of Good Shepherd, and Tanya Pofuri, who's just joining on the line now, is the incoming Chief Executive. So we've got a week handover, and what a wonderful way to spend our handover week to be as part of this committee. So I'll hand over to Tanya.
Thank you. Welcome, both of you.
Ka pai. E rauranga tira mā a tēnā koutou. E rere ana ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou I tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira. Our thanks to the People's Select Committee for your time this morning. And Emma has introduced us, and we are from the Good Shepherd, which is a charitable non-government organisation focused on two critical issues facing women and girls in Aotearoa. First, the slow violence of poverty, and the prevalent violence of family harm. We want women, girls and their families to be safe, strong, well and connected, and we advance this through activities such as alternative lending options, such as non-interest loans for essential items, services and debt consolidation, supporting survivors of family violence, economic abuse to remove unjust debt. In other words, debt that they've been forced to take on or that was taken out without their knowledge, how to access government entitlements, and support for women to generate dignified income and achieve financial well-being. And because of this, we have a wider interest in a just and mana-enhancing economy that serves all. An important part of this is systems change to prevent hardship and harm to women. In other words, public policy decisions that, at a minimum, don't drive or further entrench failure demand. We submit that the Equal Pay Amendment Act 2025 should be reversed. The supporting points are, firstly, procedural. There was no regulatory impact assessment. Given the significance of the change, it seems incongruent to develop, let alone pass, such significant legislation without appropriate data modelling and forecasting. The implications for human rights and our international obligations that were in the cabinet paper were redacted, so impossible to see what that meant. The Treaty of Waitangi analysis consisted of precisely zero analytical detail. And as stated in the cabinet paper, the proposals in this paper have been developed in a short time frame, in other words, rushed, with limited time to assess implications and unintended consequences with a narrow and targeted consultation. Finally, bypassing the Select Committee process denied those directly and materially affected the ability to be consulted and to have input. When these issues are collectively considered. This legislation, in our view, was neither jurist nor prudent. Secondly, a blow for gender equity and everyday women. Women's pay inequity due to horizontal and vertical labour market segregation is well known, well researched, well documented, and we have robust longitudinal data on this issue. The pay equity claims, now abandoned by this government, were effective mechanisms for addressing and putting right this enduring injustice at scale to the pay equity mechanism in the future. For women's quality of life, for indeed their longevity of life, access to even basic goods and services, and financial security, being able, the freedom to live without the daily grind, toxic stress of worrying about how to put food on the table, let alone manage a financial shock or save for retirement. You cannot achieve gender equity without dignified income. And there are disproportionate impacts for Māori and Pasifika women because of the disproportionate representation of wahine Māori and Pasifika in low-paid jobs. We work here at Good Shepherd, we work daily with ordinary, everyday women who do not have access to dignified income, yet who work as community workers, healthcare assistants, etc., noble professions. Working women who cannot meet the most basic of costs. This is not the vision of the land of milk and honey. The choices for these wahine are stark. Go without, or high-cost lending with the very real risk of spiralling harmful debt. And what does this mean for wahine experiencing family violence? Faced with the threat of poverty, women may choose, and we see this in our mahi, in our tautoko of wahine, women may choose to stay in an abusive relationship. And it takes money to leave a violent relationship, to set up a new home, etc. A lack of financial independence and dealing with the impact of economic harm or economic abuse are cited as key reasons why women stay in violent relationships and are unable to overcome the enduring effects of abuse and establish a life free from family violence, a human right that we should all be able to prevail. And our third and final points. We support the well-founded notion that certain occupations and industries are undervalued because they are dominated by women. The very occupations and industries that hold together our social fabric are key to the reproduction of labour, look after us when we are ill and at our most vulnerable. And the insult that these occupations and industries are unskilled. And to those proponents, I would say, and I'm quoting a care worker, you try and get a dementia patient to take their medication. The care economy, such as sectors like aged and disability care, are staring down the barrel of significant labour shortages. And why would you want to work in undervalued, underpaid and overworked occupations and industries? And what of this country's perennial challenge, the direct relationship between low wages and low productivity? And what about the pensioner poverty of the future if working women now cannot afford to save anything for their retirement? The costs of women's poverty will be borne both now and intergenerationally, yet there is no plan, as a previous speaker noted. Instead, we're creating failure demand now and for the future, having simply kicked the can down the road. This act is indeed a false economy. Thank you, wahine mā, for your time today. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I'll pass over to you for any pātai. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and congratulations on your new role. What a great start.
Thank you.
I'll call for questions from the committee. Steve Chadwick, have you got a question? You're on mute, Steve.
She ruled me out in the last submitter of a question, so she's making up for it now. Thank you, Madam Chair. And welcome to the role. I think your comment about the slow violence of poverty was fantastically impactful. The woman that you called us everyday woman, we're all everyday women, Tanya, every one of us. But how do they contact you? And do they contact you formally? So have you got a record of those growing concerns that you're seeing?
We do. So we try to make it as easy as possible for women to get in touch with us. We've got a number that women can call us on, and we also work through our partners in the community and also our partners in the public sector as well know to refer wahine to us. And we are collecting increasing volume of insights and data so that we can start to show patterns. And
that's the data we'd love to see, actually, Tanya, if you can share it once you've got it collated. And was there a spike after May?
Not yet, no, but we are seeing that so about around about 64% of our clients from our last financial year rely very heavily on government support. There's also a lot of people that we're just unable to support because they don't meet some of our criteria, but we would desperately like to be able to provide them with our no interest loans. For example, we can't currently take single people on the job seeker benefit, which is highly relevant to this conversation, and a high proportion of single mama are our clients. So it becomes increasingly difficult. We do note that we are taking data around occupations increasingly, and it's mirroring what we see from Stats NZ. Around 60% of women who are working in those 4 out of 16 categories that relate to care industries that, as Tanya said, are traditionally undervalued in society and underpaid. So we'll share what we can with you, panel.
Thank you.
Finally, Dame Marilyn.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Emma and Tanya. I've never read or heard the term dignified income before. Now, did you coin that, or does it come from somewhere? It's really like because of dignity and human rights, but also your whole explanation of it is like a much sense capability.
Do you want me to take this one, Tanya?
Yeah. So, and I really like this, and I just have to tell you where the triggers went. I've always liked Nina Simone's definition of freedom, which is simply no fear. And I thought, if you had a dignified income, you'd have no fear.
We talk about it internally that it's the proxy for the dignity of choice, that your income enables that dignity of choice. It's part of our strategic plan. We have recently defined it, and we will send to the committee we've got a little paper on what it means to us, but in a nutshell, it is income that is more than just enough to get by. It allows for women to live fulfilled lives. It's enough to pay the bills with a little bit left over certainly for emergency saving, but also just for some sort of nourishment in your life, a little bit of extra. It is stable, it's secure, and it is safe. And ideally, it allows some flexibility and some fulfillment. But those are, we're not setting the bar very high, Dame Marilyn. But we're certainly defining it above just getting by.
So very much in the vein of not just bread, but roses too.
Kia ora.
That's a wonderful note to finish on. Thank you so much, Emma and Tanya. Really, really appreciate it. And I know there'll be a follow-up for a lot of further information from you. Thank you. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Okay. Next we have from the PSA Corrections, we have Josephine, who's an organiser with them. So really looking forward to hearing from Josephine.
Kia ora koutou, testing.
Testing received. Good to see you, Josephine.
Lovely to be here. That last presentation, I wish I'd watched them all. I'll set aside time to do so. That was fantastic. Kia ora koutou, my name's Josephine O'Connor. I'm an organiser with the PSA. I work in Wellington, and I've been working on behalf of PSA members within corrections who are have been subject to 3 pay equity claims over the last 5 years or so. In part because of the amount of time and interest I've had in this, I've got an enormous amount to say. And when I was watching Donald Trump before the UN yesterday, I thought I've got the capacity and the ability to talk for 57 minutes when I've only been allocated 11.
I'm sure you'd make more sense.
And so I have watched some of the submissions, and I am really keen because there's 3 separate claims and there's a lot that could be said about each, but I'm keen to actually kind of lay out very briefly what the picture has looked like for these members who have been subject to the claims, and then to take questions and to kind of allow as much time for that as possible. So again, taken at read that the submission's been provided and read. The thing I think is interesting about the claims at corrections is they're actually, if not to buy into the kind of the disingenuous spin that's been out there around comparators, but it's an actually very clean and stark picture, these claims within corrections, partly because there happens to be 2 significant frontline cohorts within corrections. It's the largest core public service agency of about 11,000, and it has this, I think 89% of the workforce is in the front line. And then if you look at the front line, it kind of falls into kind of 2 categories: those who work in the prison environment, who are predominantly men. They wear uniforms, they have very discreet terms and conditions that you often see in male-dominated workforces. That's often who the public thinks about when they think about corrections. They think about men who work in prisons and wear uniforms. But in actual fact, there's a gigantic amount of work that is performed in what's called the non-custodial side of corrections. The bar for entry into that environment is higher, as in you needed a degree or equivalent to, for instance, come in as a probation officer. The average worker in that environment is female and about 44, and they have a completely different set of pay and conditions. And over time, these pictures these distortions, these asymmetries have become very embedded. And so if when I'm talking to people about pay equity, I often will use the example of corrections just because it is so stark, the difference in expectations about what you are needing to fulfill in your role and then what you end up being paid. It's a very, very clear picture. So the dissolution of the claims has been devastating for the members and for the workers at large who stood to benefit from them. I won't go into much more detail. There was a lot of detail in the submission that we provided, but keen to take any questions, and I'm kind of taking notes as well, because if I need to submit additional information or if there is content you think would be useful, I'd be more than happy to provide that as well. Yeah, kia ora all.
Thank you so much, Josephine. I will call for questions, but I do have a quick question myself as well while we're waiting for others to put their hands up. I couldn't find it because I was listening attentively to you, but in your written submission, I think it was under point 8, you said the Department of Diversity and Inclusion Centre excluded PSA representation. That seems, particularly for the public sector, an incredibly aggressive move. And I have to say that some of the practices seemed slightly more out of kilter about some of the more meaningful engagement with other departments. Would that be a fair statement?
Certainly. I mean, we would be expecting that workers in the core public service at large, but in the core public service are working for an exemplar employer. And that terminology is used by the Public Service Commission, it's used by ministers, it's used in collateral that you find around the public service. So with that goes certain expectations that we would be involved in big pieces of important work like the Gender Pay Action Plan, like diversity and inclusion endeavours. And this year we received an email that, essentially it said we are no longer going to be relying on our union network partners. And instead of that, if delegates or members wish to be party to D&I work, they can come through our traditional employee networks, i.e. unions are deliberately being excluded, and we've always had a seat necessarily at those tables. So that was a kind of that's really affected the membership and the delegates who are very involved in that work. And as you can imagine, within corrections, it's not a walk in the park, particularly for Māori and Pacifica staff who work within corrections. Additional support is necessary. The nature of the work is really hard. It's and PSA has been very vocal with respect to the efforts that we've needed to put in place. Just to give you one example, probation officers who are subject to this claim were up until 2023 subject to a very discriminatory pay system where they had to prove their competence in order to move up pay steps. And we took strike action in 2023 to de-link and to move to annual automatic step-based pay, which the prison staff already had. The male-dominated staff already had that. They didn't need to prove their competence to get pay increases. But as you can imagine, any kind of performance-based pay system has particularly discriminatory effects on certain cohorts of staff. So that was just one of the things we would be working within the D&I committee and talking about. But yeah, that's an active conversation with corrections as well about our exclusion in that space. And it's deeply disappointing. Yeah.
And just as a sub, did anything preempt that? Was it just a random?
I think it was felt, and they would say this, I think, it was felt that corrections is a complex industrial environment and we have to be very vocal because there are about 7 different collective agreements, multiple different pay systems. And if there are 3 pay equity claims and issues with flexible work and gender pay, you can imagine that the PSA involvement in that committee is going to be organised and have momentum and have focus. And they said essentially that maybe you take your pay issues and your collective bargaining issues and your pay equity issues and your flexible work issues and your diversity and inclusion issues and you take them out of this environment and maybe work on it somewhere else. And we said, no, this is the environment for these conversations. As inconvenient as it may be for you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you. Sue Bradford has a question.
Kia ora, and thanks so much to you and anyone else involved in making such a comprehensive and clear submission for those of us who are not familiar with the issues. It's really shocking, and quite something to see it all put together so clearly with those 3 claims and the gross inequity of what's happened and what continues to happen for your workforce. Now, it may be covered here. I can't remember every detail of the submission, but I'm just wondering how I realise the barriers that the new legislation has raised, we all do as part of this process, but What is your position or take now on any chance at all of the groups in your sector of taking claims under the new legislation? Like specifically, I mean, off the top of my head, you can see them, but what are you seeing very clearly in terms of the opportunity to raise again?
Yeah, there's lots of thoughts that we're having about that. I mean, each union is having to consider, in the light of the new legislation, what our options are.
Yeah.
The administration staff at corrections were covered by the admin clerical claim that was across the whole of the public service, and we had particular work within corrections on that. So that's a wider conversation. The psychologists at corrections are 78% women, so they meet that threshold. They're also, that would be quite a small claim, and our tendency within the PSA has been to take claims that are not just for those under coverage of the claim, but have wider, effect. And I think that's why we were disappointed with the probation claim, because I think there's 68% women, so they're just beneath the threshold. Each claim, produces its own picture. And the probation claim was going to have positive impact for the psychs and for the administration staff as well. We could see the likelihood of that. The probation claim was very, very detailed, and we worked extensively with corrections on that for 4 years. And as you well know, all of those decisions are made by consensus. And what was emerging throughout was, it didn't come as a surprise to us, but it was, stark would be an understatement in terms of the undervaluation that was discovered, the degree of complexity, and just how much the role had grown over the last 2 decades without any job scoping or kind of traditional job evaluation. So it's left us in difficulty, Sue, because we are unlikely to relay any of those claims, I think, while the legislation is currently in place. But I think I put in this submission, all of the issues that we discovered, of course, are now unresolved and getting further embedded. So it's a horrible thing to watch, to have that opportunity to discover it with the employer, not through an adversarial means, but to actually over time go, whoa, now we know this and this, and then no avenue to rectify.
Oh, kia ora, Josephine.
Yeah,
thanks for being able to share that much. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Dame Marilyn has a question.
Kia ora, Josephine. Thank you very much. I'm just looking at a piece of paper here that says, with the probation officers, you reached milestone 3 in August, October 2023. I'd be interested in where each of the 3 claims had got to when they were all struck down, as it were. And given the complexity that you talked about, the different awards and contractual arrangements and everything, under the new regime, are there still just 3 claims, or is it like a whole lot of others and now you've got 16 or something?
Yeah. I'll start with the top question in terms of where did we get to. The admin clerical claim was a gigantic claim, had the ability to, had the work been finished and people that would have had a massive effect across the public service. And if I can just kind of speak to that briefly, we've got administration staff who have been with corrections for more than 40 years. And they're currently earning 62K, and they this year received increases that were less than the cost of living, and I'm talking about increases that were less than $1,000. And that's 42 years service. So I was not thoroughly involved in the admin clerical claim at large, but within the corrections area of it, I know it well. Coming to the probation claim, we were before the Employment Relations Authority. And so if we go back to kind of start of May before the news hit, we were in dialogue with corrections about prepping for that ERA appearance and how that was going to look. With respect to the psychologist's claim, We were a little bit further behind. The role profiles had been validated by the workforce, and we were moving to looking specifically at the REM with the comparators, the REM and the conditions. So we're kind of a year back. So yeah, that might not answer all of the questions. They were each in different states. The probation claim was closest to the finish line, and right throughout, we were very we were lucky to have had the same team, the same personnel from the department and PSA for 4 years consistently, and we were working at speed. So we were quite optimistic about where we were going to, when we were going to finish and where we might land. But yeah, they were all in different states. Yeah.
Thank you. And finally, a quick question from Leanne Dalziel.
Yeah, sorry about this, but I tried to find the coroner's inquiry that you referred to in relation to the woman who was killed by someone on probation, a neighbour. What I'm concerned about is that we have these coroner's inquiries, recommendations come from them, and no one follows up. And I mean, it's a bit of a personal thing for me at the moment because there have been a number of cases locally where coroner's inquiries are leading to some rather disturbing issues being raised, but who is there to follow them up? I can't find that particular one. I don't know whether, do you have access to the actual coroner's report?
Don't know whether I've had access to that. I've had access to what's been reported in the media about that.
Yeah, no, I found the media reports, but I couldn't find the actual coroner's report. But I might just go looking for that separately. I'll write to the coroner and see if I can get a copy. Because I think it is worthy of looking at when we have very clear lessons learned, even though in that case it wasn't the probation officer that was attacked, but it could have been. And, if we don't learn the lessons from mistakes that are made, then we'll keep making them and the consequences will be dangerous.
Indeed.
So, yeah, thank you for raising it, though. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
It's the note that the submission ends on, in some respect, which is via pay equity, we have an enormous amount of information around workloads, additional hours that are being undertaken with no payment, some really glaring pictures. Nobody works an hour for free in a prison environment.
No.
Whereas in the community, the cohort that's being managed, we're talking about 26,000 people, 7,000 on electronic monitoring, is becoming more complex. And it shouldn't take a terrible event for corrections to self-reflect and go, oh, these were the opportunities to address that. And I think that they themselves would say that they were, in some sense, reliant upon the pay equity claim to address many of the issues that they didn't have the resource to address via other means. So it's a real, I don't want to say own goal, but, the Minister of Corrections at present is, very fond of talking about his love for the front line. You'll really hear him talking about the administration officers, the probation officers and the psychologists that are dedicated to rehabilitation and reintegration.
But the reality is that probation officers are frontline. They're just not in a prison, So, I just think you've made a really powerful submission this morning. We're grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Josephine. It's been an amazing submission. Your written submission was fascinating. I love the descriptions and all the detail in it. So really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure you understand we'll be following up for a bit more information. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for your work and all your time you're putting into this. It's noticed. It's very important. Kia ora all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we'll be going to Carol Gordon, I understand, next. Welcome, Carol. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Welcome.
Kia ora, everyone. How lovely to meet with you. I feel really privileged. And I want to begin by honouring all the work that you've done and that others, and it was really humbling to listen to the last speaker. Really humbling. I'd like to just introduce myself very quickly. I've got a long history in women's affairs back to the International Women's Year and all of the beautiful work that we did. And so I feel quite overcome, really, like yourselves, that we have to face such issues in today's world. So I honour your efforts hugely. I want to say today is my 85th birthday. And still we carry on. And I just want to say, you know, that it's quite an emotional thing at this stage of life to have to stand up for women like we do and like we always will do. Kia ora, Steve. And I feel very deeply that this is a primal issue. And I want to speak to that today, honouring the work of all those that are involved in the legal and political processes. But I want to go today from my background in terms of always having worked in social justice issues, in adult education and in health, and in the most pressing time as strategic advisor to the UN Decade on Healthy Ageing, which I've been honoured to be involved with. So in recent time, I've been working in that field as a social and political gerontologist. It's a bit of a lonely role because I'm quite harshly political from a critical analysis point of view that's called a political economy approach, which is a holistic approach to the economy. So today I want to say that I believe that this legislative process has been a dreadful injustice, and I know that you feel that and that is what has moved you all. So taking that as a dreadful injustice, I kind of want to call on the deeper primal aspect of that. I want to call to the mother. And it's symbolic that it's more than just a policy, but it's an attack on the mother, to us as women and to the mother as the earth. So it's about power, as we know, but it's an abuse of the sacred role of women. It's not just about work and pay. It's so much more symbolic. And I think that's my key message, that the detail is so important, but it's the symbolic nature of it that undergirds what we really have to deal with. So it's abuse of the sacred feminine, and I'm sure you all understand that. So I want to respect you as a committee and all the submitters who have dealt with so much detail that I'm not dealing with today. My second point is that I think we will need to act to stand up again, and you know that, and again and again, and we've been doing that. But I want to say that what I've learned along the way about the neoliberal systems and their abuse of power is that we will need to create a new story, that we can't fight it, it's too embedded and it's just too big because it's so global and embedded now. And I reference a UK journalist called George Monbiot, who has written a book about this, and he concludes, he unpacks the whole neoliberal system, and it's a dear little book that's very informative, and it reminds us of all the things we know. But he concludes that it's no good tackling it, it's no good fighting it, we have to create a new story. And I've been doing that with the work with the UN Decade for Older People. It's no good bashing up against the embedded system, particularly the health system, and we have to actually find another way. But that's another point. So if we're creating another story, it would be one that's unifying for all ages of women, so that we're getting beyond that abuse of the mother, so that we're actually empowering women of all ages to understand the dreadful injustice, which people know in their heart, but don't know how to deal with. I'm greatly aware of the financial impact over a lifetime. That's my next point. As an elder, I'm hugely aware of how women have to struggle in later life and how that role as an elder is deliberately undermined. That the role of a mother as an elder, as a woman elder calling for justice, is silenced, actively silenced. And it's an abuse. And the capitalist system of real estate, of retirement villages, silences that voice. It's embedded in so many aspects of our policy. That's not even beginning to talk about the care that isn't. And it's about women because they live longer. You know, our New Zealand life expectancy is now 83, and I'm only 85. But women suffer from chronic conditions for nearly 12 years of later life. And I'm quoting WHO and UN demographic, blah, 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 because I'm into a whole thing called health span, which AI can now turn around through genomic and lifestyle testing to turn chronic conditions right around. And what will that mean for women? Marvelous. That's another story that I'm really passionate about. So if we come back to this injustice that rolls over a lifetime, can we claim the role of women as elders? Can we look to the lifetime prospect of what pay equity does as an injustice, even though the detail of what is happening for everybody's pay is so vitally important? So I want to just emphasise the gifts that elder women give when they're included in society. Women look after the planet. Women look after everybody and everything because they care. I don't know what more I can say than that. Women care more. And we will care, and we'll continue to do it. And we've got all those caring roles. And I don't want to underestimate that role as an elder woman that we're missing in our society. And we're missing the voice. And congratulations to all of you who've stood up. And I'm sorry I didn't do a submission, but I was overwhelmed at the time with what I was doing. And it was such an emotive subject for me, I couldn't get to it. And so I'm sorry. So I want to just stress the contribution of women as elders and how we've got that longer life now to do that and to overcome the denial of the historical denial of the feminine. So my challenge is, and it's different to the working life pay issue, my challenge is to ask, why is elder abuse not a crime? And what's that got to do with power and money and all of those things that we're really talking about? It's still hidden. It's hidden. It's covered up. We have a day a week that somebody says, oh, well, we shouldn't do elder abuse, but it carries on, and it's abuse of the mother. So my final point is, what is the unifying story? And is it money? And it probably is, as the kind of pokey point of the spear. But is it more? And if we understand that it's more as the mother, and that's precious and sacred, how do we talk about that? Anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was a wonderful submission. You've got nothing to apologise for. You've covered it all in your oral submission. And I have to say that as far as your role in healthy ageing, you're just testament to your work. You're extraordinary. And I noted that the gifts that older women give, you've given a real gift to this committee, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone. It's been a pleasure having you here. We've got time for one question from Steve Chadwick, who'll be furious if I don't let her ask this question. So just one question, but we're running close to time. And happy birthday.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And thanks for your advocacy. Carol, my question to you is it about the words we use?
Yes.
The understanding, we all understand, those of us in the know about pay equity, but we heard a new word today about a dignified income, a dignified right to ageing.
To be, just to be.
So should we change some of the language that we use?
I'm very passionate about changing the narrative. And so changing our language to use the word elder gives grace and dignity and a role. It gives a role to older women. It gives a role to, Maori never say a senior. Oh, for goodness sake. They always say lovingly, our elders. They say that more than they say kaumatua, because they know that different tribes use kaumatua in different ways. Even that's hard to work with. But, you know, an elder is all Indigenous people over the world understand that role. But in New Zealand, we've denied it. It's horrible. And there are so many words like that that we can, in our actions, create that change. So a very important point. I've got a list, Steve. Thank you for asking that. Yes, the narrative is so amazing. And so is that then part of changing the story? It is. It is.
Thank you so much, Carol. I do hope you're going to do something lovely for your birthday.
Yes, I've got my family popping around and doing things, and I've got my lovely daughter with me that Steve knows, and so I'm just very happy.
That's great. We'll have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for coming. Okay.
Thank you for the time with you. I feel that it's very precious. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you. And now, last but certainly not least, we have Alan Blake.
Kia ora. Let's get everything lined up. There we go.
Hi there, Alan. Lovely to see you.
Thank you very much.
We've read your submission, and you have 10 minutes. You're the lucky last, and so we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Kia ora tātou. Alan Blake aho, ko whanganoia tāra e noho nei. I'm delighted to speak to this committee. I really am. I've been very grateful for the opportunity that you've provided to people to have input into a bit of legislation that otherwise we would not have been able to. So it should, but however, you know, obviously it shouldn't have had to come to this. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So a little bit about me. I've been a cleaner. I've been a nurse. I've worked in the post office. I've been a policy analyst with government and local government, and currently I'm a paid gardener. And I follow a passion in research for walking improvements for poor old pedestrians who are always forgotten. And I do lots of volunteer activities as well. So I've been in very many female-dominated workforces, I feel. So I well remember when I was a nurse about the discussions we had about pay equity, even though we didn't call it that at the time, about how police officers could, after 6 months of training, get paid more money than we did after 3 years. And so there was a real, there was a lot of discussion about that, and that was some time ago. And I didn't appreciate it at the time when I was working for the post office about having the published pay scales that we could see, where you knew what everybody in the organisation was getting paid, and there was a process for challenging that. And it was a much more fair and transparent system than we've got now, where that sort of information is hidden. And I think it's possibly some kind of model that we could use going into the future. So I've been following the pay equity claims, and I thought that the process was really robust. That was such a good process, and it's such a shame that it's gone. And it was a fair process, and I thought it was going to lead to some really good outcomes for women. So when the pay equity bill and that process was used to ram it through Parliament, I found that really galling. I thought it was a real disrespect for the whole process of how we do things in New Zealand. So I've noticed that many people have already spoken about the details about current pay equity and all the issues around that. So I wanted to focus a little bit about the other side of it, or the process side of it. So my plea to this committee is to make recommendations on how to improve the legislative process. But the use of urgency for non-emergency regulation that has wide public impact has got to stop. And the lack of oversight by the Parliamentary Select Committee and the lack of time for consultation by the House has got to stop. So I heard Dame Sylvia Cartwright earlier in your committee process talking on some of these issues, and I thought she made some fantastic points that just about everybody else makes much better points than me. So I'm just sucking from everybody else's goodness. And I read a paper a while ago, a 2024 paper by Jeffrey Palmer and Katrina Williamson, called Protecting Aotearoa Democracy by Reforming Parliament, typically dry Jeffrey paper. And it's considered some of the changes in depth that are needed to reform Parliament a little bit, to make some of these things not happen again. They made 10 recommendations, and I thought of particular interest were the ones that we should increase the number of MPs in Parliament and reform the Select Committee process, and that we should reform the method of making legislation, including using what they call the 10 principles of good lawmaking, having the House sit for more time during the year, and the use of urgency was much more limited in scope. So I think we need more checks and balances in place like these sort of things to ensure that good laws that serve the people of this country are made, and not just have this complete disrespect that we've seen. So it's a very short little talk here. So I'll just really please People's Select Committee, using the submissions and all the papers that are available, like the above, from Jeffrey and Katrina, and make some recommendations for better lawmaking in New Zealand, protect our democracy from authoritarian rule. That's my last little bit. Thank you.
So much, Ellen, and very, very poignant points that you've raised. And actually, I don't think you're sucking off anyone else's thing. I think you've raised points, and there's been a real consistency around it. It's all the submitters that have submitted have a real clarity of what the issues are. So it's been very, very helpful to the committee to see it coming from different perspectives. So I really appreciate that.
Right.
Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, I have one, just in terms of the work that you've done, and it's very varied. I started my career as a nurse a long time ago, but once a nurse, always a nurse. Have you, in all your dealings with women and workers, did anybody have any inkling about what was coming about the changes before we saw them in the media, effectively?
No,
No.
that was a nasty shock. Yeah,
It was.
no idea. I thought it was such a good process. I'd been listening to it on the radio about how the pay equity claims were put in place and what was happening. I thought it's really a really cool process, really innovative and things like that. So
and assurances coming from the government during that time. Okay, Dame Marilyn's got a question.
Ellen, you might just have answered my question, because during your presentation, you talked with sort of quite some familiarity with the work that goes on in the comparator fixing. And I just wondered where that had come from, because there's large numbers of people who really don't understand it at all.
Yeah. No, I heard, I can't remember her name just at the minute, but the woman who was one of the leads on this work, and she was so good at explaining what they were doing and how it worked. And it just was such a good process.
Amy Ross?
Yeah, I think it was. She was on the radio talking about it. So then I sort of followed up a little bit more on what was happening with that. So yeah.
Oh, well, you'll be pleased to know she's an advisor to this committee.
Thought she might be. Thank you so much for hearing me. I think you're a fantastic group of people to set this whole People Select Committee up. Go you.
Thank you very much. Likewise, we very much appreciate your submission, making the time and all the work that you're doing. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Alan. Okay, I think now that brings us to the end of our 8th hearing, and I'd just like to thank all the submitters that came today. We're just really quite gobsmacked by the high calibre of submissions that we are hearing and seeing. And can I say on behalf of the committee that it's a real privilege to be part of this process. And also thank you, as always, to the hardworking committee and also our amazing support people who do an extraordinary amount of work, all pro bono for us, to enable us to have the privilege of hearing your submissions. So it's over and out for us, and we look forward to the next hearing. Thank you.